You are 12 years old. Your body is still fragile, barely beginning to understand itself. Yet the world has already decided it is no longer yours. It is 1443 AD, the walls of Bletsoe Castle rise around you like a prison built of limestone and secrets. Men in velvet robes and fur cloaks gather in a cold hall, their breath misting in the winter air, speaking about your life as if you were livestock, priced, bartered, and sold. Their voices echo, deep and certain, weaving your fate before you can even form the words to protest. You are Margaret Beaufort, heir to lands, wealth, and a bloodline so dangerous it threatens the throne itself. The flicker of candles dances against their faces, men who carry rings and titles, yet none carry mercy. They are the architects of futures they will not live to bear. You are a child, yet you are already a currency in a game older than your bones. The rushes beneath your feet smell of mint, rosemary, and decay, scattered to mask the rot of time and the unwashed bodies that surround you. And in that smell, between earth and spice, you understand a truth that will haunt you. In this world, innocence is not protection. It is bait. Your guardian gestures with a jeweled hand, his voice deep, rehearsed. The girl brings substantial holdings, he says. Holdings. Lands. Wealth. That is what they call you now. Not daughter. Not child. Not even Margaret. Holdings. You are an estate in human skin. You are a vault in a girl's body. And across from you, your husband-to-be. 14. Gangly, awkward, staring at you only for a moment before turning away as if ashamed to witness the theft of your childhood. He is as much a pawn as you, though the game will make him king in ways you can never be. His gender gives him illusion. Yours condemns you to sacrifice. This is the hook of Margaret's story. Married at 12. Pregnant at 13. But the tragedy is not her childhood alone, it is the machine that devoured her. The system. The centuries of corruption, bloodlines weaponized, and little girls turned into bridges for empires. And what you must understand, listener, is that Margaret Beaufort's story is not only hers. It is the architecture of control. The way power feeds on innocence. The way institutions disguise exploitation as destiny. And once you see the truth, you can never unsee it. Because history does not whisper. It repeats. The wedding morning arrives cold, sharp, and merciless. Frost clings to the earth like shattered glass, and the stone chapel where you kneel feels more like a tomb than a sanctuary. The blue silk gown they dress you in is heavy, suffocating, foreign against your fragile frame. They call it royal, yet it feels like shackles sewn with thread. Candles flicker along the walls, casting shadows that twist and writhe, as though even the saints painted in the chapel recoil at the ritual about to unfold. You speak Latin vows you do not understand, binding your childhood to a boy barely older than yourself, and in those hollow syllables, a new law of existence seals itself into your marrow. Your life is no longer your own. This, the chroniclers will say, is duty. This, the priests will bless as holy. But you feel it for what it is, the cold machinery of power grinding you into place, turning a child into a womb, a girl into an instrument of bloodline, inheritance, and war. They will not write of the terror in your chest as you say the words. They will not capture the way your knees ache on the stone floor, or how your body, still barely that of a woman, already bends under weight meant for dynasties. Margaret Beaufort became a mother at 13. Her son, Henry Tudor, would one day wear a crown soaked in war, betrayal, and the blood of thousands. But understand this, her pregnancy was not nature, it was policy. A living womb became the battlefield of nations. Her suffering was not accident, it was design. She was constructed to be a vessel for an agenda written long before she drew breath. And here is the shadow you were never meant to see. Margaret's story is not an exception. It is a blueprint. Across centuries, across nations, girls were stripped of choice and transformed into carriers of empire, pawns of church and crown, their bodies drafted into wars they did not choose. It is a system older than kings and still alive, disguised now in polished language and civilized forms, yet the architecture of control remains. The lesson is bitter, but necessary. The powerful have always found ways to write their will upon the flesh of the powerless. They shape laws, rituals, and customs not for morality but for dominion. And every time the world tells you it is tradition or destiny, you must ask, whose destiny? Whose power? For Margaret, the price of survival was submission. But submission was never safety. It was only the first step into a labyrinth where bloodlines were currency, and betrayal was the air everyone breathed. The child bride becomes a mother, and the mother becomes a widow before her body has even healed from the tearing of childbirth. 13 years old, Margaret Beaufort lies in a cold chamber, her small frame broken by the weight of life forced upon it. Her husband is gone, her child is fragile, and already the world circles her like vultures scenting blood. They do not see her as human. They see her as an equation, bloodline plus inheritance equals power. And power is never left unclaimed. The Wars of the Roses, 2 roses, white and red, their petals hiding thorns sharp enough to cut kingdoms to pieces. Margaret is bound to the red rose of Lancaster, but her marriage, her child, her very existence makes her a target in the endless chessboard of ambition. She is not free to choose sides. She is the side. Her son, her body, her blood, all leveraged in the great war machine of England. The chronicles will tell you of battles, kings crowned and uncrowned, men slaughtered in mud and fields of ash. But behind every clash of swords, there were women like Margaret, women who were never asked, only used. Their marriages brokered like treaties. Their children weaponized before they could even walk. Their wombs became the factories of dynasties. Margaret understood this far too early. That survival required silence. That obedience was a mask worn until obedience could become influence. She prayed, she plotted, she endured. The church called her holy, but holiness was only the veil beneath which power gathered. For every kneeling prayer, there was also a calculation. For every whispered Ave Maria, there was a bargain with destiny. Do you see the structure now? Power disguises itself as sacred. Corruption cloaks itself in ritual. The masses are told it is God's will, while behind closed doors, bishops and lords carve futures with knives sharper than swords. They say Margaret was pious, but what is piety when your faith is weaponized to keep you docile? What is prayer when the church itself is part of the machinery devouring your flesh? This is the forbidden truth. Institutions are built not to protect you, but to extract from you. They do not exist for morality, but for continuity, the continuity of their own dominance. And Margaret's life proves it. From child bride to mother of a dynasty, she was both pawn and player, victim and architect. But power is never given. It is taken. And Margaret, broken, used, silenced, was learning that lesson with every wound carved into her life. The girl who was once prey begins to learn the language of hunters. Margaret Beaufort, the child stripped of agency, the widow left hollowed by childbirth, sharpens her silence into a weapon. You must understand, silence, in a world built on domination, is not weakness. It is camouflage. And Margaret learned to move unseen in a world where every step was a trap. Her weapon was faith. Outwardly, she was the picture of piety, a woman forever in prayer, cloaked in devotion, kneeling at altars until her knees were raw. But look deeper. Faith, for Margaret, was not simply salvation. It was cover. Behind rosaries and psalms, she wove a network of alliances, whispers, and debts. The church gave her the perfect disguise. No one suspects a saint of treason. No one suspects a prayer to be a blade. And so she carved her path carefully. While men fought and died in fields choked with mud and blood, Margaret endured. She let them underestimate her. She let them believe she was powerless. And in the shadows, she traded loyalty like coin, ensuring that every man who dismissed her piety would one day kneel to her son. Here lies the core of control, psychological mastery. Margaret understood what the powerful always conceal: you don't have to wield the sword to own the battlefield. You must only own the narrative. She was learning the mechanics of power not in the clash of armies, but in the manipulation of perception. She embodied obedience to mask her rebellion. She appeared holy to mask her ambition. She bent without breaking, because bending kept her alive long enough to strike. Do you see it now? This is the architecture of survival in a corrupted world. The powerful design systems to make you compliant, but in compliance lies an invisible weapon: patience. Institutions expect your obedience. They do not know what to do when your obedience becomes strategy. And in this moment, I will ask you something. Not for me, but for yourself. To seal this revelation, to burn it into your identity, comment below these words: twice, obedience is camouflage. Write it twice. Because those who understand this principle are no longer pawns. They are predators cloaked in stillness. Margaret was not simply surviving. She was preparing. And when the chaos of war reached its peak, she would unleash the son she had birthed at 13 upon the kingdom like a storm centuries in the making. The kingdom bleeds. The Wars of the Roses drag England into madness, brothers slaughtering brothers beneath banners of red and white, kings crowned only to be hunted down and executed like animals in the street. And in the midst of this chaos stands Margaret Beaufort, small in frame but vast in design. The men think they are the players, but Margaret is the one writing the rules. Her survival has not been chance. It has been calculation. Every marriage forced upon her, she turned into an opportunity. Every alliance dictated by men who thought they owned her, she reforged into threads of her own hidden web. She moved like a shadow, never leading armies, never wearing armor, yet entire battles tilted on the debts and loyalties she whispered into being. And always, her focus remained fixed on one singular figure: her son, Henry. The boy ripped from her at birth, raised far from her arms, but never far from her plans. In him, Margaret saw not just blood but destiny. He was the weapon she would sharpen against the throne itself. The Yorkists, the Plantagenets, the Pretenders, all of them were noise. Henry was the answer. The lesson here is brutal but necessary: power does not require force. Power requires endurance, vision, and the ability to let others destroy themselves while you remain standing. Margaret watched kings burn through their strength, watched men slaughter one another for fleeting crowns, and she waited. The patient hunter always outlives the frenzied beast. But do not mistake patience for passivity. Margaret was a storm contained. She bribed, she schemed, she played at loyalty while her eyes remained fixed on rebellion. When the Yorkist King Edward IV died, leaving behind his vulnerable sons, Margaret saw the cracks splitting open in the kingdom. And into those cracks, she poured her influence, her ambition, her unshakable faith that her son would rule. This is how institutions are broken, not by open defiance, but by infiltration. By disguising survival as submission until the moment comes to strike. Margaret did not rise because she was chosen. She rose because she refused to be erased. And when Richard III seized the throne, murdering the young princes in the Tower, or so history whispers, it was Margaret who saw the final alignment of chaos and opportunity. England had grown tired of blood. Tired of corruption. Tired of kings who devoured their own. And she was ready to offer them something else, a dynasty born from her suffering, her silence, her design. The storm breaks. Years of patience, silence, and hidden alliances converge into a single blade pointed at the throne. Richard III, the usurper, sits upon England's crown with blood on his hands and paranoia in his veins. He has slaughtered his way to kingship, yet he cannot silence the whispers: the princes in the Tower are gone, vanished, murdered. His reign is not majesty, it is shadow, fear, and rot. And in that darkness, Margaret Beaufort makes her final move. She does not raise armies herself. She does not wield the sword. But through her hands flow letters, promises, and gold. Through her words, rebellion stirs. She convinces men that her son Henry is not just another pretender, but the rightful king destined to end the cycle of carnage. She binds together enemies of Richard with the promise of something greater, stability, a kingdom cleansed of corruption, a new dawn. But you must understand, this was not born from idealism. This was born from strategy. Margaret had endured a lifetime of chains. Now, she was sharpening those chains into weapons. Henry Tudor lands at Bosworth Field in 1485, carrying the weight of his mother's relentless ambition. The battle is chaos, shouts, steel, mud, blood. Richard charges, desperate to cut Henry down himself, roaring like a beast cornered. But destiny, woven in silence for decades, crashes upon him. Richard is slain, his crown plucked from the corpse and set upon Henry's head. And in that instant, Margaret's transformation is complete. The girl married at 12, pregnant at 13, broken and silenced, has engineered the fall of kings. Through her endurance, her cunning, her unshakable vision, she has birthed not only a son but a dynasty. The Tudor line begins with her. Henry VII rules because of her. And every king and queen that follows carries her shadow. Now listen carefully, this is not just history. It is revelation. Margaret's life exposes the machinery of power that still operates today. Institutions break the innocent to feed their agendas. They disguise exploitation as duty, corruption as destiny. And yet, within that machine lies the secret. Those who can see beyond the illusion, those who can play obedience as camouflage, can bend the system itself. The crown upon Henry's head was not the crown of a warrior. It was the crown of a mother who had weaponized silence, patience, and strategy until the world itself had no choice but to kneel. The battlefield quiets. Bosworth is won, Richard lies dead in the mud, and Henry Tudor ascends the throne as Henry VII. The crowd cheers for the boy king, but make no mistake, behind him, unseen yet absolute, stands the woman who forged his destiny. Margaret Beaufort, once a girl stripped of her childhood, now becomes the architect of England's future. She does not wear the crown, but the crown belongs to her all the same. She calls herself, My Lady the King's Mother. Not queen, not consort, not widow. A title entirely of her own making. In a world where women were silenced, she carved a space of command. Her seal appears on documents, her hand shapes alliances, her influence weighs heavier than lords who had spent their lives in armor. She establishes colleges, reshapes the church's role, and ensures the Tudor dynasty rests not on accident, but on design. But here is the darker truth. Margaret's legacy is not simply one of triumph. It is a reminder of how systems consume the innocent to perpetuate themselves. She rose to power because she mastered those systems, marriage contracts, inheritance laws, the church's sanctified corruption. She bent them until they served her, but only after those same systems had torn her childhood apart. She learned, and then she turned the very architecture of her oppression into her weapon. This is the forbidden lesson the chroniclers dare not tell you: power does not belong to the strongest or the loudest. It belongs to those who see through the mask. The mask of tradition. The mask of destiny. The mask of holy order. Margaret saw the machine for what it was, control disguised as law, and she learned to twist its gears until they obeyed her hand. And you, listening now, must ask yourself, where are the masks in your world? Where are the illusions designed to keep you docile, compliant, silent? The powerful still play the same game. They still trade lives as currency. They still dress exploitation in the language of duty. The battlefield is different, but the machinery is the same. Margaret Beaufort did not choose her fate. But she chose what to do with it. And in that choice, she remade a kingdom. That is why her story matters. Because once you see the system, you can never unsee it. And once you unmask it, you are no longer the pawn. You are the player. The child who was married at 12 and pregnant at 13 became the mother of kings. She rose not because she was allowed to, but because she refused to be erased. That is the secret history you were never meant to hear. And now, it is yours.